Hello everyone and welcome to episode 105 of the James Layton Fitness Podcast. Now in this specific episode we'll be discussing the truth about meal frequency within a fat loss phase, and more specifically how this actually affects your metabolic rate, or if at all. And if I'm honest, this is still a very common fitness myth, and one of the reasons why I brought this up is someone came up to me in my gym where I train last week and they asked me this exact question. I personally thought that this myth had been well and truly busted. However, quite clearly it probably hasn't. If this person asked me the question, there's probably a lot of you listening to this podcast who also think about the same thing. So basically this is the common belief. The common belief is a higher meal frequency basically means a faster metabolic rate, and therefore this will allow you to lose more body fat. That is the train of thought that people have. However, the evidence is very clear now. Meal frequency does not have any impact at all on your metabolic rate, and in short, within the context of a fat loss phase, you should really be letting your personal preference dictate your meal frequency. So whether that's 3 meals per day or 6 meals per day or 8 meals per day or 2 meals per day, it really doesn't matter as long as you're still meeting those daily calorie and macronutrient targets. Now there's a slight nuance to that recommendation within a muscle building phase, which I'll discuss later in the podcast. However, the reason why meal frequency does not have an impact on your metabolic rate is because of these reasons. So in short, your metabolic rate is broken up into 4 parts. You have your basal metabolism, which is closely related to how much muscle mass you have. The next component is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT, and this is basically all the calories you're burning that's associated with movement but not exercise. So for example, fidgeting, all that subconscious movement is all non-exercise activity thermogenesis. The next one is exercise, obviously how many calories you're burning during exercise. And then finally the thermic effect of food. So there's 4 parts: basal metabolism, NEAT or non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the actual calories you're burning during exercise, and the thermic effect of food. And none of these are influenced by your metabolic rate. None of them change because of having a more frequent eating pattern. Additionally, this doesn't downregulate if you consume less meals per day. So as such, this should really be a game changer for you. But if you've been under the impression that you need to be eating every 2 to 3 hours, this will make achieving your fat loss goals that much simpler, less stressful, because you know now you're really just focusing on those daily totals: protein, carbohydrate, fat and calorie figures, as opposed to trying to micromanage these meals every 2 to 3 hours. Now the one nuance and caveat to this is within a muscle building phase. Because within a muscle building phase we're trying to maximize muscle protein synthesis, I wouldn't suggest going any lower than 3 meals per day within a muscle building phase, but still 3 meals per day is relatively straightforward for most people to consume. So finally, here's some practical applications within the fat loss phase. Focus on actually what counts, and that is basically the daily totals with regards to your nutrition, your daily protein, carbohydrate and fat and calorie figures, what you're consuming on a day-to-day basis, and as such just let your personal preference dictate how frequently you're eating throughout the day. And as I mentioned, this should just make the fat loss phase just so much less stressful, because you're really focusing on the bigger picture goals, which is the daily totals, as opposed to getting stuck in the minutiae, which is what most people think about. And that is one of those is just meal frequency, how frequently you're actually eating throughout the day. So hopefully that's been useful. Hopefully you can start applying this immediately. If you thought you should be eating 6 to 8 meals per day, you now know that you don't necessarily have to, unless you have a personal preference to eat 6 to 8 meals per day. But most people, typically it's very difficult to eat that frequently with your busy lifestyles, etc. So thank you very much for listening. If you're still yet to download my free ebook, How to Set Up a Nutrition Plan, if you go to James Layton, Layton fitness.co.uk, you'll see a tab at the top of the page called free ebook, and you can download that immediately. Thank you very much. I'll look forward to speaking to you next week.